Welcome to Purpose 360, Douglas Lamont. Douglas is the Chief Executive Officer of Tony's Chocolonely. And I have been wanting to have a conversation with you for a very long time. I've been watching the company grow. I'm a big shopper at Whole Foods. And obviously, I go to all the socially responsible conferences and such. And so this is a real yummy and delicious honor and joy for me. So welcome to the show, Douglas.
Thank you, Carol. Great to be with you.
So thank you. So I always love to ask, when you were growing up, we're always influenced by our parents. And so prior to Tony's, you were at Innocent Drinks for how many years? Many years.
Yeah, 16
yeah.
years.
So you've got this social impact, purpose-driven company in your blood. But did something happen as a child growing up that influenced your leaning in this direction for your career?
For sure. My parents were both entrepreneurs.
There you go.
So from a young age, I sat around the family table and they ran a business together. And it was originally my parents were in restaurants, but then in the early 80s, they moved into technology for restaurants, which in the early 80s was an unusual thing for people to do. But so I sat around the kitchen table listening to business conversation because it was a family business with the two of them running it. And so I think I was just influenced. And I think where the social side of that came in is they were both very focused on the culture of the company and how they they weren't the biggest, they weren't the best, but they knew that they could keep really good talent if they created a really good environment. And my father in particular was very focused on that. And so I think that how you created good culture, I think just seeped into me as, that sounds like a pretty sensible thing to do. And then I think obviously over time, I had that in me. And then when I joined Innocent, I think the kind of, this is 2005, 2006, the kind of sustainability combination of good culture and good sustainability kind of merged in me. And from that point forward has sort of, been a driving force of how I want to lead and the types of companies I want to be involved in.
And that's amazing. Was there a point in time when you were like 8 years old or 9 years old and you said, I want to be an entrepreneur? Anything like that happen?
I was the kid that set up the school sweet shop and,
I did too.
And managed to do that. So I was always sort of doing that kind of thing. Interestingly, I haven't become an entrepreneur. And I think also because as well as the good side of listening to my parents talk about their business, it meant that I also heard, oh my God, we could be going bankrupt in 5 minutes.
Okay.
And then, oh no, it's all good again. And oh no, we could be going bankrupt. And there were a few times where it got pretty close to that. And I think that's where I've ended up where I am because I like that entrepreneurial environment, but also I like that doing something that's not so close to the bone. So, both Innocent and Tony's had some meat on the bone, so to speak, when I joined. So taking something that's already formed and then helping it really grow. And it seems to have been the kind of the blend that I picked up from that young experience of light and dark of the life of an entrepreneur.
Speaking of light and dark chocolate, I'd love to ask you, put you on notice. What's your favorite flavor of the range of the brand?
It does move around, and obviously we've just launched some new filled bars, which I would say currently I'm enjoying. Oh, there you go, you've got one right in front of you. So they're pretty incredible. But I have to say I love our everything bar because it means I don't have to choose. So the everything bar is the best of the top 6 selling flavors combined into one bar. So it's for the indecisive person.
Okay.
But it's an explosion of everything, and I have to say that's pretty special.
So now you're giving me permission because I didn't want to open it.
There you go.
Look at that space. Everybody out there that wants to communicate your values and what you stand for, look at that space. It's fantastic. And of course, I'm going to maybe I'll take a little bite. I don't think it's polite to eat during a conversation, but this is about Tony's. So we're going to have to try this yummy caramel. Oh my God. Okay. So there's an amazing origin story for this company. And whenever I share it with colleagues, they're like, gobsmacked So can you talk about how it began? Because it didn't begin as a chocolate company. It
Yeah,
began as an advocacy journey.
yeah, absolutely. The three journalists, of which Tone, aka Tony, is the most famous, but Roland de Jong and Maurice Dekkers were the three. So there were three of them, and they had a TV show in the Netherlands that investigated different things. And I guess the closest analogy with the US example is a kind of an early prototype of the John Oliver show.
True.
Is what show they had in the Netherlands in 2005, and so they decided they'd read about this Harkin-Engel protocol, which was the big chocolate companies committing to address child labor in the supply chain, which they recognized was there in 2000. And so in 2005, they decided to say, well, let's go and see. And by making that commitment through that protocol, they avoided the law being legislated against. So they said, well, let's go and see whether anything's been done. And so they went to West Africa and realized nothing had been done. And there were still over 2.5 million children working in child labor in West Africa, and were really shocked. And to their core, they did the TV show on that and nobody paid any attention. It was a nice episode. So that, but it really got under their skin. So they're like, we're going to do another episode on this, and we've got to ramp this up in a different way. So what they did was Tone, who was the front guy, the man in front of the camera, but basically walked into a police station and said, you need to arrest me because I've committed a crime. And the policeman are like, okay, who's this nutter?
Right, nutter. Okay.
Because under EU law, if you're complicit in a supply chain or a consumer product that you know has been done illegally, you're committing a crime. And so he was like, well, I know that there's child labor in this chocolate bar and I'm eating them, and therefore I've committed a crime. You need to arrest me. And so
arrest me, right?
So and then it went. And obviously this was being filmed and it was a TV show, but it went. They got it to the court. They managed to fly over some West African kids who had been involved in child labor. And so that really then caught the imagination. The way they were telling the story, and they were journalists, they were storytellers, caught the imagination of the Dutch public to say, yeah, there is a real issue here. We should think about this. And then the third episode, the third element of the series they did was then say, well, if none of the big chocolate companies are going to do anything about this, we need to set it up for ourselves. So then the equivalent of The Apprentice, Shark Tank, whatever, they went and said, well, how could we do this? And it was a stunt. They weren't thinking of setting up a business. They literally rang around to find how they could make a bar, how they could get ethically sourced cocoa. And Charlie and the Chocolate Factory, the Johnny Depp one, was being launched in the Netherlands in 2005. They set up a guerrilla stall next to that premiere and told everyone they were going to be there. And of course, their queue, because they had a massive queue. They sold 5,000 bars on day one. Everyone was saying, can we have bars? Can we have bars? And they thought, actually, yeah, let's really put our money where our mouth is and set up a company and do this for real. And that's where Tony's was born. But I think the really important thing is that the impact and the mission came first before even the business. So the business wasn't even in the picture at the beginning. And then obviously the business came as a way to serve the mission. And I think that's a really important fundament, and why we say we're an impact company that makes chocolate, not a chocolate company
that has impact. You're very much the model of Body Shop. Then
exactly.
Anita Roddick, bless her soul, she left us way too soon. But she always said she wanted to use the Body Shop as a framework for people who were indigenous cultures that were making all these incredible products, and they needed to have fair wages and things like that, and give them the soapbox. And that's what the early years, the Body Shop. So kudos to you. How many years did it take for Toon, who then became Tony, easier for us to say, became a real company that was, that had policies and procedures and sourcing and
so I think the first 4 years were pretty chaotic, particularly as three journalists didn't know how to run a company. They knew how to do TV programs, but they got it up, they got it off the ground, and then in 2010 they sold a portion of the company, or a significant portion of the company, to Henk-Jan Beltman, who had actually worked with me at Innocent previously.
Oh, that's a connection.
Was based in the Netherlands, who saw the opportunity to say, I can take this amazing purpose and I can put if you like, some professionalization around it in terms of FMCG best practice to scale it and to make sure that we deliver on the mission. And so I think it was the combination then of the founders and Heng Yan, who then post 2010, you really started to see the business scale in the Netherlands. And then the sort of international journey, I would say, beyond the Netherlands started in kind of 2016, 2017 in the US, in the UK, and in a few other markets.
So you were approached. Now you're at Innocent. You've got a great business. I mean, it's huge. It's global, wonderful product, great ethos. And then you're approached about Tony's, and it's not that developed. And so what was that spark that drew you into Tony's?
Yeah, I think so. I love my time at Innocent. I sort of helped with the founders and then running it for the last 10 years to take it from kind of 50 million to 500 million. So it was an amazing journey. But at 500 million, it becomes a very different business. And
true.
As the CEO, you're definitely getting into more of the governance and all of those topics, which, whilst I'm not, as we talked about earlier, I'm the sort of half entrepreneur, half sort of structured business person. I think 100 million to 500 million is my sweet spot in terms of what gets me out of bed, what makes me excited. It feels small enough that I can get my hands on it and we can pull the lever and see the change. And I just, after 16 years in one category, I wanted a new challenge. And
there you go.
Okay. The shareholders of Innocent were also shareholders in Tony's, and so actually, when I said to them, "I'm thinking about time for change. Who do you know? What do you know?" 6 months later, they came back to me and said, "Oh well, Heng Yan's decided that his sweet spot is 0 to 100, and so he's thinking about appointing a successor. Do the two of you want to talk?" And so that was the sort of, if you like, the starting point. And then when I got into it with Heng Yan and the thing that's Innocent was all about proving that a good business could be a big business and sort of setting an example, but that was the sort of boundaries of it. We'll be good, and then if other people follow, great. Whereas Tony's is a little sharp on that. It's saying our mission isn't just to be a good company that scales; it's to change the whole industry. Our job is to end exploitation in cocoa, not to grow Tony's to as big as it can be. And that sort of added layer, if you like, of changing an industry as well as growing a brand was sort of an attractive new challenge. Plus, obviously, the business was establishing in the US. And again, for me, that was a stretch that I hadn't done much in the US before. And it had an e-commerce element to it as well. So there was sort of, if you like, from a personal learning and development point of view, but also lots of things that I feel I could add value to as well. So it's that nice blend of stretch for myself and stuff I felt like I could add value to.
Very fortunate. Can you share how your son? You said that when he was 8, and you told him that you were leaving. Yeah. That's a wonderful little anecdote.
Yeah. So obviously, my son used to get a lot of kudos from me being CEO of Innocent because it's far more interesting. Most of the dads were lawyers or bankers or whatever, and no one knows what that means when you're 8 years old. But if your dad's CEO of Innocent, cool drinks product that's in their fridge, you get a lot of kudos. So when I told him that I'm leaving, his bottom lip started to wobble and he was looking a bit sad, but I quickly followed him with, "But don't worry, I'm going to be the CEO of Tony's Chocolonely." And he sort of punched the air, and he was very, very much over it within about 5 seconds. So I think he still continues to get the kudos of me turning up with the chocolate every now and now at the school gate. So.
Oh, at the school gate, you probably have a lot in your cupboard, in the kitchen for sure. I'm curious, what is his favorite flavor?
Well, he up until recently, actually, we've just got him through it, but he's been dairy free for a long time. So, but when he was a kid, so dark almond sea salt was definitely his flavor.
Oh, nice. It's a very sophisticated one. I love that. Okay, so you say in your materials, and I have to say to our listeners, and we're going to put this in our resources, you have amazing social impact reports. I mean, yours was like 291 pages. And it reads, it's beautiful. And it's a click book. And I have to say, gotta give you kudos, because there are key pages I wanted to print out. And you have a little button that says, print this page. Fabulous. Great. That was really helpful. Beautifully designed. I love where you go through the facts and then you show the stories. So many human stories of the farmers.
Yeah.
So, you say that traceable cocoa is the foundation for addressing the root causes of cocoa farmer poverty. So I would love you to share with our listeners because there's two parts to the company. There's the delicious chocolate, and then there's the marketing of it, and we'll get into that in a bit. But there is the supply chain, and it is tough. And so, can you bring it to life for our listeners and where you're making a dent? And you also you made it larger. It was child slavery, and now it's exploitation writ large.
Yeah.
So, do take us on that journey.
So I think two things are important. We talk about being an impact company rather than a purpose company because for us it's about being able to measure the impact. So there's a lot of people who have purpose and visions and whatever. They sit on the wall, but unless you're actually making an impact, those statements are worthless. So we definitely call ourselves an impact company, and I describe myself as being CEO of the mission, not of the brand. And that's really important because ultimately our mission is to do two things. Prove that there is a sourcing model in West Africa that allows farmers to earn a living income and ultimately get out of this exploited poverty cycle, which includes therefore not sending their kids getting their kids working on the fields, but sending them to school. We've got 1.5 million children still working in child labor today in West Africa. How do we break that cycle of poverty? And we've basically, the number one priority is to establish a sourcing principles and a way of working that prove that you can do that. And that's what principally the work for the last 20 years has been about, is editing and trying and making mistakes and learning and doing it again and restarting again, based on 5 sourcing principles, and maybe as we go we can unpack those. But once you've got those, and what we see is the data, and we're very data led, so we can see that they're working. We can see that child labor rates are going down from an average of kind of 40-50% down to less than 4% in our long-term
significant
cohort.
Huge.
We haven't eradicated child labor, and again we don't make that claim, but a 90% reduction with a bit of focus is really important. We see that our living income rates relative to other co-ops, significantly better, and it's that blend of 5 sourcing principles that does it. And traceability, knowing your farmer, knowing where the cocoa comes from, and making sure you can trace that through, because then you can commit to paying a high price, and we commit to paying a living income price, whatever's going on in the world market, which means typically we're paying somewhere between 40 and 80% premium to the world market price to the farmer. And then the key, because this isn't about handouts or charity, this is about changing the mindset and the capabilities on the ground. So it's about building strong farmers, and that's helping them build cooperative structure. So building their own businesses, and so if you create a strong co-ops, you give them long-term contracts. As part of that, we basically commit to them. We will buy cocoa at a living income price for 5 years. But if you get a better offer from someone else, you don't have to sell it to us. So we're not locking them into us.
That's very fair.
We're locking ourselves to them, but we're not locking them to us. And again, as the prices spiked in the last 2 years, we saw that they could get more elsewhere, and they chose to do that. And that's fine. And now the cocoa's come crash back. They're back with us saying, oh, sorry about that. Maybe next time we'll stick with you because you're there for the long term. And again, that, which then allows them to invest in productivity, invest in quality, invest to send their children to school because they have the confidence they're going to get the right price for their cocoa, rather than having to ask their children to work on the farm because they can't afford to hire labor and have productivity groups coming around and all the rest of it. So that model is working. You then need to scale that model, because otherwise the big guys then pat you on the head and say, well, it's really nice, Tony's, but you're a micro pilot and we're big proper companies and it won't work at scale. So then that's where the rest comes in. That's where Tony's Chocolonely comes in. It's like, well, okay, I'll prove that I can scale this by scaling a brand that requires lots of beans, so you can scale that. What we realized, and again, great credit to my predecessor, Hank Yan, in 2018-19, he realized that however fast Tony's was going to scale, even if we got to $1 billion brand, we wouldn't be big enough to prove that the model worked at scale. So he set up this thing called Tony's Open Chain, which said, actually, anyone can have our beans. If you're a competitor, if you're a private label provider, source your beans through us, and we can scale faster, and we can prove this change model works at scale. And so that's what's happened. Obviously, Tony's has scaled a lot, but more importantly, so has our open chain partners. So whether it's Ben and Jerry's, whether it's big retailers like Waitrose in the UK or Albert Heijn in the Netherlands, all source their cocoa through us. And as a result, just about 40% of our cocoa is sourced for other people, and we're almost twice as big as we would be otherwise, which is how you get to prove it. And that's what impact looks like, collaborating in the supply chain rather than just trying to maximize it and keep it as your own secret source is really what we're about. That's what an impact company does.
Right. A very expansive mission.
Exactly.
And I love the fact that you are about the relationships that you you build with your farmers. And so can you share the 5 principles? Because I think they are very intentional. You're an intentional company. And so I think that because again, you got lovely flavors and marketing and branding communications, but the farmer relationship, the supply chain is core.
Yeah. So again, just sort of running through the headlines. So it's traceability. Mm-hmm. It's paying a higher price, committing to a living income price. It's building strong farmer networks through the cooperatives. It's committing to them for the long term, but an asymmetric contract so they don't commit to you. And it's supporting them with quality and productivity programs. And whilst it's not a sourcing principle, what we do alongside that is child labour monitoring. So to make sure that if you do that bundle, does it increase their living income and does child labour go down? So those are, if you like, our 2 key output measures from applying those 5 sourcing principles. And what we see is that model is working, but it, as you say, very intentional, very dedicated. Yes. I've got 25 people on the ground in West Africa working directly for us.
There you go.
So we're not at a distance. We're hands-on in this, building those relationships. We know those farmers. We visit every household every year ourselves.
Yeah.
You know, so that's it's pretty deep.
And I think you have in your materials, you say that you have 4. Every quarter you're checking and you're talking with, and then the big companies, maybe they do it once a year or something like that, maybe twice, but you're deep into it.
And the historic model is that also the big, they have middlemen on the ground for them.
Right.
So they're not even under their own name on the ground in West Africa. Now that's different for different companies. There are definitely lots of good examples. And what I would say is, that what you see from the big guys is that they're strong at one of these, and it's typically, funny enough, not about the pricing one where you commit to pricing. They do productivity well, and there's definitely stuff we can learn from them as well. So we're far from perfect. We constantly edit and learn, and there's definitely stuff that we see some of the big guys do. We say, yeah, we can learn from that. Let's up our game on productivity or whatever it may be to do that better. And so this is never a standing still. Yeah, we've nailed it. It's always edit, learn, improve.
Fabulous.
That's what we do.
That comes from you. So how often do you go visit? How often are you on the ground, hands-on, meeting with farmers? And how do you feel when you go through that, when you're eyeball to eyeball?
So me personally, I try and get there once a season, and I'm back there in November at the beginning of the new season. It's incredibly depressing and uplifting in equal measure because you realize the scale of the problem and the scale. This is not big farms with where you're talking to 10. This is
like 4 hectares or something.
Millions and millions of subsistence farmers.
Yeah,
basically operating a football pitch each, or 3 football pitches each, or whatever it is, up in complicated, poor areas. And so you can see how the exploitation has come about because they've been they don't have the power. And so what the uplift, so that when you see that structure, to some extent, it's impressive, like, oh my God, have we had any impact? But then when you go and visit the co-op, you go and see yeah, we've worked with them over the last 5, 10, 15 years. And this is now a real proper business with good capabilities and a good team. And that you can see the confidence that group have in terms of, if you like, running their own business as a cooperative farming group. And you go, yeah, that's where we make the difference. And then you look at the data and you see the difference we've made in terms of the actual outcomes. And you see it's not gratitude. It's an eyeball to eyeball. We have, a good business relationship with these farmers, and that feels really good. It's not, we're the big guys coming in from Northern Europe to say, bow down to us. It's an eyeball to eyeball relationship, and I think the power is in that relationship, as you say, and that's. Really
think important. It comes through in the product. It comes through in the taste of the product. So, and you're very soulful, which is what Tony's is all about. I would love your reporting, by the way, is incredibly transparent, and you report on good and you report on bad. Yeah. And why do you do that?
Because what we're trying to, in our mind, in the change model we have, what we're trying to do is talk about the issues, because only until you talk about the issues or shine the light on them can you do something about them. And so yeah, we talk about the fact that we find child labour cases. So and we happily publish and say we found 1,200 cases, but this is what we did about them. This is how we've remediated them. This is how quickly we've addressed the issues. And by talking about them, what we hope is it normalizes it as a conversation, so that then the big guys who will be sitting on much worse numbers, but they're so fearful of the backlash if they ever said it, actually acknowledged it, that they don't, and therefore they don't say anything about it, and they're trying to not, and therefore they don't act on it, because it's like, well, if the problem doesn't exist, what are we acting on? So my wish for all big companies, and this doesn't apply just to cocoa, is that there's this amazing year where we have a moratorium and everyone gets to put their SHIT on the table and say, right, this is our starting point. Our only commitment from now forward is we're going to improve. The world will be in a much, much better place. Now, it's not going to happen because journalists love the dirt, right? So again, this sort of, everybody loves to amp little things up and make them bigger and big thing. So the challenge with change is you have to normalize the issue in the first place to then do something about it. And that's what we're about. And that's why we're transparent. But also, I ran a company called Innocent for a long time. And if you're called innocent, you better damn well be innocent, because every journalist wants to write the guilty headline and say, oh, we found they're doing this. And transparency is actually a very liberating place to be, because if you can say, yeah, we screwed up, here it is, you don't have to hide it. Like, so I think so much energy in companies goes from, oh my God, if anyone ever found out that this happened, we'd have a PR crisis. Whereas we go, well, let's tell them it happened. And then everyone goes, we love you because you're so transparent. So in some ways, it's very liberating also to be transparent, because then you're not trying to second guess anything. You're just saying, this is what we are. This is what we do.
So, so maybe, like every day is a holiday, is like a special day. Maybe it's declare your shit day.
Yeah. I would love it. I mean, that honestly, for a better world, that would be the best thing. Maybe we can get John Oliver to
that would be funny. You look like John Oliver. Actually. I can tell you that. I know you do. This is a great segue into. I want to talk about the role of a CEO in building a social impact brand. So you've called yourself an advocate and a capitalist, and you talk in some of your previous podcasts about, you got to manage growth, and then you got to manage marketing and the brand. So I want you, because many of our listeners want to be Douglas Lamont in some years. They want to be at a company like that. So what's your advice to them on how you are managing and growing the company to make it real and authentic?
Yeah, so I think two things. As I said earlier, I see myself as CEO of the mission, not of Tony's Chocolonely, the brand. And that's really important, because it drives the kind of decisions that I make as the leader of the company. So as we said, the reason for Tony's and the reason for Tony's Open Chain is to supply volume into our 5 sourcing principles. prove that you can scale this impact model to encourage other people to change to it. So, okay, actually this model works at scale. This is not just the right thing to do, it's the smart thing to do, because look at Tony Chocolonely, is globally successful now, and all the rest of it. But I have to prove also that Tony's Chocolonely is a profitable company, because otherwise the other objection is, yes, the supply chain scales, but you don't make any money. Like, you've got lots of revenue, but you don't make any money because all your supply chain stuff's so expensive. That's another reason for us not to act. So my job is to remove the barriers. So on that side, I have to prove that we are a profitable, successful company. So when I say I'm a catalyst, absolutely, I apply the normal rules of shareholder return on Tony's Chocolonely. We have to do that, because otherwise it's a get out of jail card, because they'll say, well, that's nice, but our shareholders won't wear the fact that you don't make any money. So we have to scale globally, but we also have to deliver strong, double-digit profit over time. And if we don't, the change model, the reality doesn't come about. The other half of it is, though, that doesn't mean that I maximize Tony's Chocolonely. So, for example, with OpenChain, the fact that I've said to Waitrose, which is, for those that don't know, a big UK supermarket chain, they source their beans from me for their private label chocolate. And on their private label chocolate, as you showed earlier, that little circle, that Tony's OpenChain logo, they've got one of those on their private label chocolate. And so they're saying, yeah, we've got Tony's in this bar too. And they're next door on the shelf to buy product at a cheaper price.
Right.
Now, if you're the CEO of Tony's Chocolonely, you go, well, that's the maddest decision ever. You're giving away your
You're mad.
You're giving away your intellectual property to reduce your sales to someone who's going to undercut you on price.
Right. My
sales guys are like, whoa. I say, no, I'm the CEO of the mission. And by Waitrose coming on board, and therefore other supermarkets around the world coming on board, the amount of beans that we put through the supply chain that drives the ultimate change will be way, way higher. So yeah, Tony's Chocolonely might be a little bit smaller, but the mission is served by this collective collaboration in the supply chain. Let's compete at shelf. Let's collaborate in the supply chain. And that for me is the fun and interesting part of my job, because it's not just branding and marketing and product and commercial. It's this multi-dimensional thing you've got to think about. And that's it's a fun personal challenge, but it's also, the key to it is thinking about what are you trying to achieve. And in our case, we're trying to achieve the end of exploitation in cocoa. That makes you think differently from, I'm not here to maximize how big Tony's Chocolonely as a brand becomes globally. And it just makes it different. It doesn't make it right or wrong or whatever, but it just makes it a different type of company to run.
That's a lovely thing. I am curious about a couple of things. You have so many structural things that you do that's very fascinating. You have 2 governance tracks. You have mission guardians, which I love, and Seth Goldman is one of them. And he we've had him on Purpose 360. His Just Iced Tea, fabulous product. And then you have a supervisory.
Yeah.
Why do you have the 2? So
the supervisory board is what anyone would consider a classic board. So it's a mix of your shareholders and some non-execs with the senior management team. So that's kind of normal. It's just in the Dutch wording, it's called a supervisory board. The mission lock is something different again. And what we said as an impact company, we wanted to make sure that was protected for the long term, because this is about long-term change and a long-term mission. And, me coming into Tony's, I don't want to work really hard for 5 years on something I'm passionate about. And then the shareholders change or the board change. And then they say, actually, and then there's lots of examples going on in AI. There's actually, we're not about this. We're about maximizing profits now. And so we're going to change the articles of the company. And we're now all about maximizing profits, and it's less about the farmers. And now we're about funky flavors and cool branding. And
funky flavors, yeah.
All of us were like, actually, how do you protect it for the long term? How do you give reassurance to employees, to your consumers, that you mean it and you mean it forever? And so what the mission lock does, we basically, and again, all my shareholders supported this, including my private equity backers, gave a golden share to 3 mission guardians whose only responsibility and their only governance responsibility is to look after the mission. And the mission's quite tightly defined against the 5 sourcing principles. So it's not completely open-ended, but it's saying Tony's 5 sourcing principles, and those are written down and said the management's job is to make sure that those 5 sourcing principles and the mission to end exploitation are fully served. And you can't change legally the director's duty without our permission. So, if we decide we want to call one something else or add another one, I'm sure they'd agree to it. But if we wanted to say, no, we don't need those anymore, they can block them and say, no, legally you can't change those. And then secondly, they have powers to act, even if those hadn't legally been changed, but you weren't following them. They then have a series of escalating powers. First of all, to say, oh, we've heard that you're doing this. Can you explain it? Yes, we are. No, we're not. This is why we are. Secondly, if they go, we haven't really explained it. In our annual report, which you referenced earlier, we call our FAIR report, they have the right to 2 pages in there to write whatever they like. So I might be able to write 200 pages, say, oh, I'm doing a wonderful job, and we're this deeply purposeful company. If they don't agree with that, they can say, no, this is all, they've gone in the wrong direction. Our opinion is this, this, and this. So they have the right to, basically, in the middle of my showpiece, write something critical if they feel. So again, making sure that you're in step with your mission guardian is really important. Thirdly, they would have the right to publish that in newspapers that we would pay for. And then fourthly, there's a kind of a chamber of commerce that you can go to in the Netherlands that arbitrates on disputes. And they would have the right to take us to that and say, you got to rule on whether actually this is a breach of the purpose or not. So both powers if management go in the wrong direction, and legal powers to make sure that the kind of mission as written doesn't get changed unless they agree with it. So that's pretty powerful.
It's very parallel to the Patagonia and what they did when they sold the company to the purpose trusts, and that their only shareholder is planet Earth.
Yeah,
and you've done a mission. It's different, but you've done a mission lock to protect what you've created.
Yeah, exactly. So it doesn't. There's no economic value in it. There's protection of the thing. So again, I like this because again, I think if we're going to change things in the world, we have to be realistic that unless there's economic return for investors, the world won't change as fast as we want it to. So I like this construct because it has some protection for the mission, but it still allows investors to get economic return at a normal rate. And so you're doing it in parallel, you're doing it together rather than, with the Patagonia one now, it's like all the returns go to X. And so it's different again. But so I'm all about proving the economic case as well as the moral case in partnership. And that, as I said earlier, that's not just the right thing to do, it's the smart thing to do because you'll be successful both financially and scale-wise.
The advocate and the capitalist.
Yeah.
I would love to ask you about the role of, you've got some great values. And I'm curious, did you help shape them? Were they there when you joined? And then how are they lived? Because they're great. They're like outspoken, in it together, entrepreneurial, makes you smile, which I love that one, and raise the bar, which you can see I'm eating during this conversation because this is so yummy.
Yeah. So so when I came in, there were values, and some of them were as you've just described, but they needed refreshing and they needed a little bit of updating, which is what we've done over the last. We sort of finished them about a year ago, because they were quite Dutch, and some of the language that we had in previous ones wasn't really resonating once we were becoming a global company. And again, as you transition from being a local Dutch company to a global company, we just wanted to make sure that the values and the way we described them resonated, whether you were in the US, whether in Germany, and so that's why we refreshed them. But obviously, outspoken has been in our DNA. We're born from journalists, so being outspoken,
born from journalists, right?
But what I love about them now is they've got contrast in them. So outspoken, but you've got to be in it together. So you can't just be against everything, and you can't just be. But you've got to be in it together. So whether that's in the team being critical, but be critical or suggest improvements, but in the right way, so that you're not just pushing the rest of the team down. So, and makes you smile. Child labour and exploitation, all this, they're pretty tough topics. And if that's your kind of the core of who you are, if you do that in a very worthy way, a very like, oh, the world's terrible, this is terrible, like people don't want to hear that. So again, we knew both internally and externally, you need to be engaging. And again, the innocent drink story is the lesson for that, right? We were very purpose-led, very ethical, but we were never boring about it. We were always fun and did great storytelling around it. And that's what Makes You Smile is all about, right? Is you've got to do the storytelling. You've got to bring the lightness. You know, there's sweet and salty in this, right? And there's salty in the topic, and there's sweet in the thing, as there is in our product. And it's that blend is sort of who we are. And raising the bar is, inspiring, showing that we can raise the ceiling. We need legislators to raise the floor, and we need others to be inspired to change for themselves.
Sweet. That's lovely. That's really great. How do you know that your colleagues are living the values? I mean, is it in their KPIs, or it's just attitudes? I know you say you got to hire for attitudes. You want people that are truly believe in your purpose.
Yeah, look, I think we're quite structured in the way that we do performance reviews twice a year, and there's a what component and there's a how component, and the values and the sort of leadership behaviors again that we're now honing for the more sort of the people that manage people. It's the blend, and making sure that we're quite disciplined in giving that feedback. Ultimately, we attract bright, capable people, but we're not bringing in the seasoned pro that's been around the block 10 times. So there's a lot of coaching, there's a lot of support to say, how do we give young, bright, passionate people lots of room to grow and make their own mistakes, but at the same time coach them, support them, and that's why the how, leadership behaviors are as important, the values, as the hero objectives hit these KPIs, and it's how you find that blend, which is really important.
And then giving the leeway. I mean, I want to flip a little bit to pivot to marketing, because you don't buy a lot of ads. You have a very small ratio, 3%, 2%,
2.7%.
But you talk about little bits of magic that sometimes become rockets. So, and that you would talk about giving freedom to your creatives, and that anybody can have a great idea. I'd love you to talk a little bit about that kind of cultural attitude, and then tell a story, one or two, about what's your favorite, because you do some really irreverent things, which are pretty funny. So maybe you've got one or two that you go, wow, here's a bit of magic that just took off.
Yeah, I think, one of my sort of marketing heroes, Adam Morgan, who wrote Eating the Big Fish, Challenger brand. He was kind of the godfather of the Challenger brand world. He wrote another book called The Beautiful Constraint. And I think I think the lovely thing about having no money to do marketing, because we're paying farmers the right price in the early days, is that it just forces you to be creative. And then it was the same at Innocent, right? They built a business on the credit card, and so it just forced you to say, well, actually, we need to do some marketing, but we can't afford it. So, but we've got this bottle, so why don't we write something? Why don't we do our storytelling on the bottle? And Innocent, sort of the wackaging thing and all the rest. Innocent was certainly the sort of the parent of all of that then followed from everybody. And similarly at Tony's, it's always been about how do we tell stories in a bold, earned way. That journalistic DNA was like, well, we're good at telling stories, and how do we encourage people to tell stories and communicate? I guess some of the best examples, again, the bar itself, and for those who've never had a bar of Tony's, when you open it, it's unequally divided. So
it's unequally divided. Yeah, exactly. That's fantastic. By the way, I'm eating half of it, so you're going to ruin my diet.
So why is it unequally divided? Because the cocoa industry is unequally divided, and also
Brilliant.
Even within that, there's a hidden map of West Africa within those unequally divided pieces. So it goes to the origin story of where we source our cocoa from, and some of these hidden gems that we don't actually tell people about, but then someone discovers, they tell their friend, and then they feel like they're part of our club, because it's also a bit about discovery. It's about clear storytelling that tells, but also hidden things that feel like discovery and therefore connection. That's some of the things we do. I guess one of the more upfront ones we do is we have an advent calendar every year, and on day 10 we leave out the chocolate on day 10. And so when the person buying the bar or the kids open it on day 10, there's no chocolate inside. And of course, outrage, like I've paid this for this. But of course, what we do is we explain the cocoa industry is unfair. We tell the story. And in the first years, we didn't have another one in there, and we got so much coverage, so much whatever. But we decided the following years we'd put a second, we'd help them catch up the day after. But again, we haven't gone, oh, how are we really nice to consumer? Make it a seamless consumer experience. We jab things in to make people pay attention. And yeah, we get lots of positive and negative coverage for that advent calendar every single year. The 10th of December every year, the right-wing UK, for example, are up in arms. GB News is like, it would be Fox News, but oh my God, this woke company doing this. But it creates a conversation. We have this, effectively what we do: create awareness, lead by example, inspire to act. And create awareness by putting friction in the system. And the unequally divided bar, some people hate it. They're like, oh, it breaks badly, and you've done it because you want me to eat more. And please, if you change one thing, just make it normal squares. And I'm like, over my dead body, we're never going to make it.
Great.
Exploitation is finished, and all the big chocolate companies are paying a living income. Then I might think about it. But while the industry is unequally divided, it's just a great storytelling. It's about creating conversations rather than telling. It's about creating a conversation and creating a reaction. That's our marketing model, and why, like in the US, we've gone from nothing in 2017-18 to over 100 million of sales now, and we spend about $1 million to $1.5 million on our marketing.
Earned. You're earned in social strategies. Very powerful. I will be remiss if I don't ask the question. And I was Chocolonely. That's what I always thought. And then when I realized it's Chocolonely, can you explain why is it Chocolonely? And then I've heard you've had some really cool promotions around that, like asking a man on the street, what do you think of this?
So the reason it's Chocolonely is because Tone and the other two journalists, Morris and Roland, felt like they were on a lonely journey to change the chocolate industry.
Brilliant.
And so that was the origin. Actually, they, as part of this TV film, they went to see Ben & Jerry's, and they were like, for whatever you do, don't call it Tone's Chocolate, because if you want to be a global brand, Tone is the Dutch name for Tony. Call it Tony's. And then they came up with Chocolonely about that lonely journey of change. Obviously, our job is to become less and less lonely. Over time. And that's what Open Chain and we have the people that join we call mission allies, and that Open Chain is our whole part of becoming less lonely. So we don't want to stay lonely forever. The whole point is to change the industry and have more and more people applying the 5 sourcing principles, either through us or for themselves.
So I can't wait for the day when you change the name of the company to Choco No Longer Alone.
Exactly. I mean, but if we ever got there, and I think it's a long road, we might think about it, because why not? That would be a story. That would be more storytelling, right?
Or be a funny April Fool's.
Yeah,
but
exactly.
You're not about April Fools. You've got some really great velocity around custom created bars.
Yeah.
And I love that you say we don't need to have, they're selling well, and then you say ditch the dull merch.
Yeah.
So I'd love people to hear about this, because this is great for gifts and for events. So explain how that's going and what it is.
So what it is, you can go onto our website, and you can, for your corporate Christmas party, or you can basically personalize your bar. You can design it. If you've got designers in house or whatever, you can design your bar. There's a few parameters. It always has Tony's Chocolonely down the edges, but effectively the front real estate is yours to design how you like, and then you can give that as a gift, whether it's to your employees at Christmas, whether it's for a launch of something. We just had a massive order from Google for a big launch that they did, and people love it, again, because we're not precious about, like, a lot of people are like, well, our brand's the thing and we must never change anything and it's got to look like this and it's got to be fun. We're like, no, we want people to know about our product, and our mission and our brand, and we're playful with the brand. I mean,
you're very playful.
Absolute Vodka years back, they did a lot of this stuff, and I think it's just powerful. It also shows up yourself with like, oh, we've got to be exactly the same
We're
everywhere.
snooty. Yeah. Right. Brand police.
But also, we make good margins, and effectively they're sampling on our behalf. So again, with low marketing budgets, if Google wants to buy 1 million bars off me and give them to people rather than me have to get people to pay, $5 plus for them in the US, I get awareness a hell of a lot quicker that way whilst making money. So again, from that point of view, it works 360 as well. So
it's working.
It's really good. I mean, it's a big. It's kind of depending on the market, but between 10 and 25% of our revenue in each country. I mean, it's a proper piece of the business.
Get rid of the dull merch. Okay, ditch the dull merch.
Yeah, I mean, who wants another corporate pen, right? If you do have a corporate branded bar of chocolate, that's way more interesting.
Or a cap. No.
Than a corporate pen.
Somewhat recently, you got a call or an email from a very well-known retailer, kind of called Walmart. And Walmart said that they wanted to carry the product. What was that like when you got that? And did you have a second, did you say, well, I don't know if I want to be in Walmart. It's too mainstream. They might discount us. What was that like?
It was never. So Walmart was always on our roadmap, but we were in the process of setting up a manufacturing partner in Chicago. We wanted to go to them when we were fully robust and had everything in place to say, okay, we could cope with this now. Funny enough, we were selling in Target and that was working well, and I think they were looking at the data at that. But one of their senior buyers or senior management went to Amsterdam, and if you've ever been to Amsterdam and walked through Amsterdam Airport, we own Amsterdam Airport. I mean, you can't turn anywhere without seeing bars and bars of Tony's Chocolonely, including our own big store there. And so I think he saw that, and we're kind of equal number one with Milka in the Dutch market.
Amazing.
So and he said, and Walmart have a strategy of wanting to bring more premium brands in, and they said, right, we really want you. And so at that point, we were obviously excited. We wanted to be a Walmart. The only actual is now the moment was, can we meet the standards and the service and the supply chain? So it was a supply chain readiness question, not a consumer fit question. Because for us, again, what we've seen in Europe is that we're a mass premium brand. So yes, we're expensive, but we're mainly expensive because our bar's thick and chunky, not because our per kilogram is that much more expensive than anybody else's. So the absolute price point's high, the per kilogram comparisons, we're mass premium. And so Walmart was absolutely where we would want to be. Can you meet the demand? You don't turn Walmart down. So we then busted everything to make sure that we did deliver, and we did. And I think we're in year 2 now, if not the beginning of year 3. So
that's great. Well, congrats.
Journey.
Congrats. As I said earlier, there are a lot of young people or mid-stage professionals that would love to work in a really authentically purpose-driven company like Tony's, or they ultimately want to rise up the ladder to your job. What advice do you give them early in their careers so that they can get on this interesting road?
So the advice I give to everyone who started their career, age between 20 and 35, I would say, don't think about going up fast, up one stream. Think about it like a career climbing wall. You're way more valuable to me in what I would call a mid-tier entrepreneurial company if I know you can turn your hand to a number of things. And so I'm not interested in people that have risen to level 42 in their corporate jargon. I'm interested in people that have done 6 or 7 different types of roles during their early 20s. So go for variety rather than height, and breadth rather than height in your 20s. Because whilst it feels important, and yes, your friend will have a one higher ladder up on the company car scheme because he's got promoted and you haven't. But if you've done 3 jobs at one level, you will go past them. So build variety of experience in your 20s will pay huge dividend, and particularly if you want to join a mid-tier company, because basically what I look for is, yes, smarts and capability and some experience in a particular thing, but I look for this: people that have rolled their sleeves up, can roll their sleeves up.
Roll their sleeves up. Okay. I like it.
Because otherwise, also people go really high up, go fast up a ladder, And then they go, oh, but yeah, I want to come and do marketing at Tony's. And they arrive. Well, what time's the limo pick me up to take me to the agency? It's like, no, you're right. You're it. You're writing the brief. You're writing the thing. You're doing the work. So again, it's not a glamorous world that we live in. It's a everybody in together, everyone around the table make this happen kind of world, and you've got to be ready for that. Because
that's great advice.
It's not executive dining rooms.
Okay. A long time ago. How about someone who wants to become a social entrepreneur? They want to create a purpose, an impact company. What one or two things, I mean, there's many things, and you've shared many, thank you. But what are one or two things they really should keep as their North Star when they're on this path?
Yeah, I think really tightly define what you're trying to achieve. I think missions that fail or don't resonate are too broad or too loose, or we'll kind of work it. So I think be quite narrow in and having said that, we're going to change the chocolate industry. That's not narrow, but it wasn't. Be good and be kind, and it had a sharpness to it. So have some edges to what you really mean. So one, you can communicate it really effectively, and two, it's a useful decision-making tool for you. So you can go, we would do that, or we wouldn't do that. That the mission really guides us. Whereas if it's a bit bland and you can fit almost anything underneath it, it's probably not sharp enough. That would be my, again, setting out with clear objective always helps.
Great. Okay. As we wind down, and this has been a marvelous conversation, and I haven't eaten during any one of my episodes, but this was delicious on all counts. So we ask these really brief, rapid fire questions. So don't overthink them, but here we go. What's one word that best describes your work?
Impactful.
Okay. What keeps you hopeful in the days this work is heavy?
I don't know whether it's hopeful, but certainly determined. That conversation we had about West African farmers, they live very different lives to us, and supporting them, but also that inspiring wider change is like, if there's a lot of people looking at Tony's, if we don't make it, I think that's deflating, and I'm inspired by inspiring other people.
I love that. Okay. What's one lesson you've learned from Tony's that you couldn't have learned anywhere else?
That we all need to wake up. That if we want to lead the world to a more sustainable future, we just all have to get over collaborating in this. We have to collaborate in our supply chains and then compete at shelf. But let's not compete all the way through, because otherwise supply chains positive impact further up this chain, whether it's on carbon or whether it's on exploitation, just won't change fast enough. So collaborate in your
collaboration
with your competitors.
Yeah, and that takes courage and vision and generosity.
Yep, all of those things.
What's one small action people can take today, so just an average person, to advance purpose or create impact in their own communities?
I think start small. Do one thing better. Like, make one thing in your community better. Don't be ambitious. Try it. I think the dopamine you'll get from that means you'll do more of those. Or make or buy one thing better. So, which is the store down the road that's actually is a B Corp, is a thing, but buy one of those. Buy a muffin from the B Corp, not from the one that's doing it a different way. Start small. Small actions, have big consequences.
Super. And if you could leave listeners with one idea or feeling today, what would it be?
Well, you quoted her earlier, and she is sort of one of my inspirations. But you referenced her earlier, Anita Roddick. I think her famous quote is, if you think you're too small to make a change, have you ever tried to go to bed with a mosquito? People, you have power, and I think in this world people feel like they don't have power, but act, and keep acting and keep believing and keep being the annoying person, and then change does happen. We as individuals find your collective, and that in itself has power.
That's fantastic. And you do talk about that Tony's is like the mosquito compared to the rest of the industry. So
yeah, although interestingly, I think we're now not small, and we need to stop being the mosquito and being at the table, having those collaborative relationships. And again, part of my signature is moving us on from being the mosquito. It served its purpose, but I now need to influence the big companies, and punching them doesn't help, doesn't drive collaboration. And so it's like, how do we work together? How do we learn from them? How do they learn from us? That's how we now deliver change in this industry. That's the next step of our mission. That's growing up a bit, but changing yourself to achieve your outcomes is also good.
Fantastic. I always love to give the last word to my guest. We've covered a lot, but this has been a spectacular conversation. So over to you, Douglas.
Oh, wow. A big drum roll finish. I'm super, the world feels a bit sort of, if you're in this space and you're a B Corp or in ESG, where everyone's a bit like, oh God, is it all? I'm completely the opposite. I'm half glass full. If you study change movements over time, they all take time. Take the suffragettes. That took 100 years. And there were many moments where it looked like the vote would be given and then it went backwards and then it went forwards. Our job, our passion is to make sure that the next time the tide comes in on these topics, it goes higher up the beach and the breakthroughs really happen and legislation really happens. There's lots of good companies raising the ceiling. If we prove that this is the right thing and the smart thing to do, the floor will get raised eventually. So stay positive, and let's show that the path we're on is the right one to lead the world to a fairer and more sustainable future.
Fantastic. Douglas, this has been an amazing conversation, a delicious one because I've been eating as we've been chatting. And I trust that our listeners will be so inspired to take a small action, ideally buy your product, and to be very authentic and engaged. So thank you so much for bringing your incredible wisdom, passion, and just delightful personality to Purpose 360.
No, I've really enjoyed it. Great to chat to you.